Welcome back, legends. When we last left the world of Durban, a miracle had unfolded in the darkness. Against all odds, Daniel and his warriors emerged from the depths of the mountain, their hands filled with the legendary power of the Sunken Vault. That spark of defiance ignited a fire that swept through the besieging Scourge army, breaking their siege and reclaiming their home in a glorious, hard-fought victory. But true peace is often the briefest of respites. The cost of that victory was etched in the pyres that burned for the fallen, including the wise Chief Thorn. Now, the weight of leadership rests squarely on Daniel's young shoulders. The title of chief is not a crown of triumph, but a chain of duty. And a new, more terrifying report has reached the mountain. The scattered enemy is not gone. They are regrouping, evolving, and uniting under a new, cunning commander. A strategic mind far more dangerous than the brute force they first faced. The isolated fortress of Durban can no longer stand alone. To ensure their survival, Daniel must now shatter centuries of tradition. The warrior must become a diplomat. The defender must become a unifier. He must venture beyond the only home he has ever known into a world of unknown allies and potential enemies to forge an alliance against the coming storm. The battle for the homeland is won, but the war for the future is just beginning. The journey continues now. The decision was met with stark silence. To leave the relative safety of the besieged keep was madness. To venture into the uncharted, legendary depths beneath it was tantamount to suicide. Yet, in the faces of his chosen few, Finn, and two other veterans who remembered the old tales, Daniel saw not doubt, but a hardened resolve. They had seen the impossible done once before in the Scourge camp. This was simply another obstacle to be overcome. "We go not because we believe we will return," Daniel stated, his voice low in the keep's silent lower halls, "but because we are the only ones who can." The entrance, according to fragmented lore, was hidden behind the great hearth in the keep's deepest cellar, a place now used for storage. Moving aside barrels and crates with quiet urgency, they found not a door, but a cleverly fitted stone that shifted under their combined weight. With a grinding groan that echoed through the ages, a section of the wall slid back to reveal a yawning blackness that smelled of damp earth and immense age. It was real. The first step into that darkness was a leap of faith greater than any battle charge. This was an adventure into the very heart of their legacy, a search for the strength of their ancestors. The passage was narrow and descended at a sharp angle, carved directly into the living rock of the mountain. They moved in single file, their world shrinking to the small circle of light from their torch. The air grew cold and still, the sounds of the siege above fading into an eerie, profound silence. This was a tomb, not a treasury. The weight of the mountain above them felt palpable, a constant pressure. Daniel's leadership here was of a different kind, navigating by instinct and half-remembered stories, maintaining morale in a place that seemed to swallow hope. They came to a junction where the tunnel split into three. There were no markings, no clues. It was a test of intuition. The tale spoke of the heart's choice. One of the veterans, Alaric, murmured, "What does that mean?" Daniel closed his eyes, pushing away his fear and doubt. He thought not like a strategist, but like a stone hands. He thought of home, of family, of the central hearth that had always been their gathering point. "We take the center path," he said, his determination cutting through the uncertainty. The heart of the mountain is its center. His mindset, focused on core values rather than logic, guided them forward into the unknown. The central path began to show signs of ancient craftsmanship, faded murals depicting the first stone hands forging their first weapons under the mountain, symbols of honor and clan unity. It was a history lesson in stone, a reminder of who they were and where they came from. This journey was becoming one of profound personal growth for Daniel, connecting him to his lineage in a way he had never experienced. He was walking in the footsteps of giants, and the weight of that legacy was both humbling and empowering. Their progress was halted by a massive stone door, sealed shut with no visible handle or lock. Intricate patterns were carved into its surface, depicting a mighty warrior holding a shield against a falling mountain. Finn, running his fingers over the carving, noticed something. "The shield, it's the same as yours, Daniel." Understanding dawned. This was not a door to be forced. It was a door to be answered. Daniel stepped forward and placed his grandfather's shield into a faint, shield-shaped indentation in the center of the door. It fit perfectly. With a deep, resonant click that seemed to shake the very tunnel, the great door began to slowly swing inward, revealing the glory of the sunken vault. The vault was not merely an armory, it was a sanctuary. The cavern was vast, illuminated by a soft, phosphorescent moss that clung to the walls. In the center stood a still, black lake, its surface like glass. And around it, preserved as if in time, were the relics of a forgotten age. Swords of a strange, gleaming metal that held an edge without flaw, shields that were light as wood but strong as steel, and intricate crossbows that could fire multiple bolts. But more than the weapons, it was the sense of peace, of immense age and resilience, that struck them. This was the strength of their ancestors, waiting for its time again. On a dais at the water's edge lay a single, magnificent suit of armor, crafted in the old style but with an artistry that was lost to time. Resting against it was a great sword, and on its pommel was etched the same symbol that was on Daniel's shield. It was a warrior's kit, meant for one person, a leader. As Daniel approached, he saw a stone tablet with an inscription. For the stone hands who remembers that true courage is not in the wielding of power, but in the sacrifice for kin. The vault was not just a cache of weapons, it was a trial of mindset. It offered not just a means to fight, but a reason to. Their reverence was shattered by the sound of grinding stone from the tunnel behind them. They were not alone. Scourge scouts, perhaps having discovered the outer entrance or another path, had followed them in. The pristine silence of the vault was broken by guttural shouts. The conflict had found them even here, in this most sacred of places. "Arm yourselves!" Daniel yelled, grabbing the great sword from the dais. It felt impossibly right in his hand, perfectly balanced. The others snatched the ancient weapons from the racks, their modern gear feeling clumsy in comparison. What followed was a strange and brutal battle in the echoing cavern. The Scourge were numerous, but the companions, armed with the superior weapons of their ancestors and fighting with the desperate bravery of men protecting their last hope, held the line. Daniel, with the new sword, fought like a demigod of legend, his movements fluid and powerful. But he knew this was a delaying action. They couldn't let the Scourge take this place. They had to get these weapons back to the keep. His motivation was now a dual imperative: secure the legacy and escape. "To the water!" Alaric shouted, pointing across the black lake. On the far side, another tunnel exit was visible. It was their only hope. But how to cross? The Scourge were pressing hard, and there were no boats. In a moment of insane courage, Finn grabbed one of the large, ancient shields. "It floats!" he yelled, having thrown it onto the water's surface like a raft. It was a desperate, crazy plan. They began a fighting retreat to the water's edge, each warrior using the wide, buoyant shields as makeshift pontoons, pushing them across the dark water while fending off attacks from the shore. It was a scene of surreal heroism. They paddled and fought simultaneously, the calm lake now churning with their movement. Arrows from the ancient crossbows found their marks on the shore, giving them covering fire. Daniel went last, ensuring everyone was away before launching himself onto a shield. He looked back at the magnificent armor on the dais, knowing he couldn't take it, but vowing to return for it if the gods willed. They had what they needed. They had the means to fight back. They reached the far tunnel, and with a final, mighty heave, they collapsed its entrance behind them, sealing the vault and their pursuers inside, for now. The new tunnel led steeply upward. They climbed, their bodies exhausted but their spirits soaring with the weight of the ancient weapons on their backs and the hope in their hearts. The air began to feel fresher. After what felt like an age, they saw a sliver of daylight. The tunnel exit was cunningly hidden behind a waterfall that cascaded down the inner mountain, within the defensive perimeter of the keep itself. They had done it. They had navigated the legend and returned home from the belly of the mountain. Their adventure had been a success. They emerged to the stunned faces of the guards, who could scarcely believe their eyes. The news spread through the beleaguered keep like a lightning bolt. Daniel had returned, and he had brought the power of the first stone hands with him. The ancient weapons were distributed to the best fighters. The crossbows were mounted on the walls. The sight of these legendary artifacts ignited a fire of belief that no speech could ever kindle. The inspirational power of their legacy was tangible. The will to resist, which had been fading, now burned brighter than ever. They were no longer just defending. They were preparing to reclaim their home. The Scourge, sensing a shift in the energy of the defenders, redoubled their efforts. The Gore Howler himself appeared before the gates, a monstrous figure bellowing challenges and insults, trying to break their spirit before the assault. But the spirit of Durban was now reforged in ancient steel. Daniel, standing atop the gatehouse, looked down upon the monster. He felt no rage, only a cold, clear purpose. This was not a battle for glory. It was an execution for the defilement of his home and the murder of his grandfather. He did not answer the taunts with words. He answered with action. Taking one of the ancient crossbows, he loaded it with a bolt whose head gleamed with a forgotten light. He took aim, not at the Howler's thick armor, but at the joint of his helmet. The shot was impossible, a thread's width at that distance. The world seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's mindset was one of absolute focus, a determination honed in the depths of the earth. He exhaled and fired. The bolt flew straight and true, striking its mark with a sickening crack. The Gore Howler's roars were cut short as he crumpled to the ground. The second head of the snake had been severed. Silence fell on the battlefield for the second time, followed by a wave of utter confusion and panic that swept through the Scourge ranks. Their second leader had fallen in a single, shocking shot. For the defenders, it was a moment of divine intervention. A roar of triumph erupted from the walls of the keep, a sound of pure, unadulterated courage. Daniel lowered the crossbow, his hand steady. This was the turning point. The obstacle of their leadership was gone. The enemy was adrift once more. Now! Daniel's voice rang out, powerful and commanding. Now we take it all back. For Thorn, for Bryn, for Durban. The gates of the keep burst open. The warriors of the clan, empowered by their new arms and invigorated by this incredible act of heroism, poured out. They were no longer the besieged. They were the avengers. They fought with a fury and efficiency that the leaderless Scourge could not match. It was the beginning of the reclamation, a street-by-street, building-by-building battle to purge their home of the invading filth. Daniel led from the front, a symbol of their resilience and their furious hope. The fighting was fierce and brutal. The Scourge, though leaderless, were cornered animals and fought with desperate savagery. But the strength of the stone hands, both ancient and modern, was overwhelming. Daniel's leadership was tested in the close-quarters chaos of urban combat, directing squads to flank strongpoints, using the high ground of rooftops for archers, and always pushing forward. He was a tactician, a warrior, and an inspirational symbol all at once. His personal growth was complete. He was the chief his people needed in their darkest and now brightest hour. By nightfall, the main keep was secure and a significant portion of the outer bailey had been cleared. Fires were lit, not of destruction, but of purification and warmth. For the first time in weeks, the people of Durban could breathe air not filled with the smoke of their burning homes, but with the promise of a new dawn. As Daniel stood amidst the reclaimed courtyard, looking at the weary but victorious faces of his people, he felt a profound shift. The sacrifice had been immense, the cost terrible, but they had overcome. Yet, as he looked toward the main gate and the lands beyond, he knew this was not the end. Their victory was local, but the Scourge was a regional cancer. One battle was won, but the war for their entire world was just beginning, and a new call to action would soon be heard. The reclamation of Durban was a brutal, street-by-street war of attrition that lasted for days. Daniel, armed with the resolve of his ancestors and the gleaming sword from the vault, was a whirlwind at the forefront of every push. His bravery was a contagion, inspiring his warriors to fight with a ferocity they never knew they possessed. They cleared homes, secured strong points, and drove the disoriented Scourge remnants before them. Each reclaimed street was a testament to their resilience, each cleared courtyard a monument to their determination. The battle was no longer for survival, but for redemption. Yet, Amidst the hard-fought victories, Daniel's mindset was shifting. The euphoria of their miraculous turnaround was tempered by the grim reality of the cost. Every fallen Scourge soldier was a reminder of the vast, seemingly endless numbers that still plagued the world beyond their gates. The sacrifice of Bryn and his grandfather demanded more than just reclaiming stone and mortar. It demanded a permanent solution. As he stood on the newly secured outer wall, looking east to where the Scourge had fled, he felt the weight of his new title not as chief, but as the tip of the spear for all who would stand against the darkness. The final Scourge holdouts were cornered in the lower granaries, fighting with the desperate fury of rabid animals. Daniel could have simply burned them out, but he saw a different path. Ordering his men to hold, he approached the barricaded doors alone, his ancient sword held not in threat, but pointed at the ground. "Lay down your arms," he called, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Your masters are dead. Your war here is lost. Surrender, and you will be shown mercy. You will be given a chance to atone." It was a staggering act of leadership and honor, a defiance of the cycle of vengeance. A tense silence followed. Then, one by one, weapons clattered to the stone floor. The surviving Scourge soldiers, broken and leaderless, filed out and were taken into custody. This single act of calculated mercy did more to solidify Daniel's legacy than any battle victory could. It showed his people that his strength was not just in his arm, but in his judgment. He would not let the war strip them of their humanity. It was a crucial step in their personal growth as a people, proving that overcoming obstacles required not just force, but principle. With the immediate threat vanquished, the monumental task of healing began. The air, once filled with the clang of steel, was now filled with the sounds of hammers and saws. Daniel worked alongside his people, hauling stone and clearing debris. His motivation was clear: to physically and spiritually rebuild what had been broken. He visited the healing halls daily, speaking with every wounded warrior and grieving family member. This hands-on courage, this sharing of burden, forged a bond with his people that was deeper than any oath of fealty. He was not a distant ruler, he was their chief, their brother. In the evenings, he convened councils not of war, but of restoration. He listened to farmers, artisans, and elders, integrating their needs into the rebuilding plans. This was the unglamorous, essential work of heroism, the self-improvement of an entire society. He established a new guild dedicated to studying the recovered ancient weapons, not just to replicate them, but to understand the advanced mindset of their creators. Durban was being rebuilt not as it was, but stronger, smarter, and more united, its resilience hardened in the forge of recent tragedy. A moon after the battle, a solemn ceremony was held in the main courtyard. Before the entire clan and their Skyfolk allies, Daniel formally accepted the chief's talk from the Elder Council. As the heavy metal settled on his shoulders, he did not speak of victory. He spoke of responsibility. "This talk is not a crown of conquest," he declared, his voice carrying to the farthest listener. "It is a chain of duty, a duty to the fallen, to the living, and to the generations yet unborn. Our sacrifice has bought us a chance, not a conclusion. The enemy out there remains. Our work is not done." His first official act was to post a permanent, rotating watch on the Eastern Pass, their eyes forever turned toward the threat. His second was to promote Finn to the rank of Captain of the Guard, entrusting him with the day-to-day security of the homeland. This freed Daniel to focus on the larger picture. The isolationist mindset of the Stone Hands was officially dead, buried with the heroes of the breach. A new doctrine of proactive vigilance was born, a testament to Daniel's personal growth from a guardian of walls to a guardian of the future. The scouts Daniel had sent east finally returned, their faces grim. The news was worse than feared. The scattered Scourge remnants had not dissipated into the wilds. They had been systematically gathered, organized, and were being drilled by a new, unseen commander. Their camp was a sprawling, disciplined city of war, larger than the force that had first besieged Durban. Worse, they were employing advanced siege tactics and forging new weapons of dark design. The Gorehowler had been a blunt instrument. This new leader was a master strategist. The obstacle had not been removed. It had evolved into a far greater threat. Daniel studied the scouts' reports in the dim light of the war room, the chief's talk feeling heavier than ever. The conflict was no longer a localized battle. It was a war of annihilation waiting to be unleashed. The victory at Durban had been a temporary setback for the Scourge, but it had also alerted this new, more dangerous intelligence to their existence. His raid on the Sunken Vault had not ended the war. It had simply triggered the next, more deadly phase. A cold determination settled in his gut. They could not wait to be besieged again. "We must look outward," Daniel announced to his war council, now including Skyfolk representatives. "The mountain alone cannot protect us from what is coming. Our strength must be multiplied through alliance." He pointed to the map, to the lowland kingdoms and the northern clans they had ignored for centuries. "We must send envoys. We must warn them, and if they will listen, unite them." The proposal was met with resistance from traditionalists who feared outsiders, but Daniel was unwavering. "My grandfather's sacrifice was to protect our home. Our sacrifice must be to protect our world. That is the legacy we must now build." He handpicked the envoys himself, warriors with keen minds and steady nerves, gifted with artifacts from the vault as tokens of goodwill and proof of their claims. Their missions were perilous, journeys into lands of unknown politics and potential hostility. As they rode out from the gates, Daniel felt a profound vulnerability. He had sent his best people into the unknown, gambling their lives on the hope that others would see the coming storm. This was the adventure of diplomacy, and its stakes were just as high as any battle. Weeks turned into a tense month of waiting and preparing. Daniel drove his people and himself harder than ever. Using the scouts' reports, he adapted their defenses and trained his warriors to counter the new tactics the Scourge employed. He pushed the artisans to innovate, creating new ballistae designed to pierce heavier armor and fortifications based on the ancient designs. This relentless self-improvement was a battle in itself, a race against an unseen clock. The inspirational sight of their chief, often the first to arrive at the training grounds and the last to leave, fueled their own efforts. During this time, his bond with the Skyfolk chieftain, Anya, deepened from one of mere alliance to one of mutual respect and strategic partnership. She taught his archers their methods of unparalleled accuracy, while his smiths helped fortify their aerial perches. This successful integration was a small but powerful proof that his vision of unity could work. It was a fragile hope, but it was a hope nonetheless, a single point of light against the gathering darkness, proving that overcoming the obstacle of ancient prejudice was possible. The first envoy returned, but not in triumph. His party had been ambushed on the road to the lowland kingdom of Verdian. He was the sole survivor, stumbling through the gates with a message of horror. The Scourge had moved faster than anyone imagined. Verdian was gone. Its fields were scorched, its cities put to the torch. The envoy spoke of a new banner flying over the ruins, a black iron crown. The Scourge was no longer a horde. It was an empire of ash, and it was expanding. The hope of alliance was crumbling before it could even be fully born. Despair threatened to consume the hard-won peace of Durban. The enemy was not just regrouping. They were conquering, assimilating, and growing stronger with every victory. The scale of the threat was now terrifyingly clear. Daniel stood before his people, his face a mask of grim resolve. "They mean to show us we are alone," he roared, quelling the panic with the force of his will. "They mean to break our spirit before they break our walls again. But they have failed. For every kingdom they burn, our determination must harden. We will be the shield that breaks them." Refusing to yield to despair, Daniel made a daring decision. If envoys could not get through, he would go himself. He would travel to the one potential ally that lay in the opposite direction of the Scourge's advance, the reclusive and mysterious marsh-dwellers of the Whispering Fens, rumored to control paths no army could traverse. It was a long and dangerous journey, but their unique skills could offer a way to strike at the Scourge's heart without facing their main army. He named Finn steward of the mountain in his absence, placing the protection of their home in his most trusted friend's hands. On the eve of his departure, Daniel went to the Sunken Vault one last time. He stood before the empty dais where the armor had rested. He had taken the weapons, but left the mantle of leadership behind. Now, he understood. He returned to the dais and, with a deep breath, began to put on the magnificent ancient plate armor. It was not an act of vanity, but of acceptance. He was no longer just Daniel Stonehands, chief of Durban. He was a symbol. He was the shield against the coming night. When he emerged, he was the living embodiment of his legacy, ready for the final adventure. Daniel and a small, elite contingent slipped out of a hidden gate under the cover of a misty dawn. They were not marching to war, but to plead for an alliance. As they descended the mountain paths, leaving the safety of home behind, Daniel did not look back. His eyes were fixed on the treacherous path ahead, on the swamps that promised either salvation or a watery grave. The fate of Durban, and perhaps all the free peoples of the world, now hinged on this desperate gambit. Back in the mountain, Finn watched his friend disappear into the mist, the weight of stewardship settling on his own shoulders. He looked out at the horizon, where the smoke of a conquered kingdom stained the sky. The war had entered a new, more dangerous chapter. They had survived the siege, won back their home, and now faced an enemy of unimaginable power. Daniel had gone to find allies in the most unlikely of places. Would this desperate mission forge the alliance they needed to survive, or would it lead their chief into a trap from which there was no return? The final battle for the future is about to begin. What will Daniel find in the Whispering Fens? Can the marsh dwellers be trusted? And how will Finn hold the mountain together in his absence? The story continues in Episode 3, The Weight of the Crown. Subscribe to be the first to know when the final chapter drops.